You're listening to audio from University Baptist Church in Beavercreek, Ohio. Our mission is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known. Please enjoy this podcast and visit us at ubcbeavercreek.com for more information.
Welcome to UBC Talking Points. Our purpose is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known through ministry and theological conversations. I'm Jason Wing, one of the pastors at UBC, and today I'm joined by Pastor Bill Letcher, Deacon Chair Corey Thomas, former Deacon Chair and returning Deacon Jeremiah Carey, and the UBC Renaissance man, jack of all trades, man who has done it all for 35 years, none other than Harry Steck. These men serve in our Deacon Ministry here at UBC, and the Deacon Ministry is one of the longest standing ministries at UBC, and it's also one of the most unique. So what exactly do deacons do? Why does the church need them? What kind of impact can this ministry have on the life of our church? We're going to talk about all of that today. So that's what's in store on this episode. Before we jump in, let's take a few minutes to get to know each of the guys in this podcast right now. So brothers, tell us, we're going to kind of go around the room. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and what you do during the week. Jeremiah, then tell us how long you've been attending UBC and what first drew you here.
Yeah, so I'm Jeremiah Carey. My wife, Emma, and I have been married going on 13 years now. We've been members of UBC since 2020, so about 6 years. We have four kids. Ari is 11, Elias is 8, Amos is 5, and Judas 2. And I work at Right Pat Credit Union here locally in Beavercreek. Emma homeschools our kids and things like that, so it's good. I like to play sand volleyball. I love fantasy football, take the kids to soccer, things like that. But those are most of the things.
And you're moving into my neighborhood.
And I'm moving into Xenia.
Yes. Yeah, baby. Let's go. Dairy Station, here we come.
I love it.
All right, Bill, same for you. Tell us about yourself, your family, how long you've been here, what drew you here.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Bill Letcher. My wife, Kathy, and I just celebrated 27 years of marriage, and we're excited about that. God's blessed us with 4 kids, 2 out of college or in college, out of college, and then 2 still at home. Our life is very busy, and it seems like we're running kids all over the place during this season in our life. I serve here as the pastor of prayer and care. Been on staff for a little more than 3 years. Just counted a joy to help care for people and serve alongside these guys, you all, just as help support you all in Deacon Ministry. It's a unique thing that we're doing. I know we're going to talk a lot about that also. What first drew us to UBC? We were looking for a church that lined up with us just as far as things that were important to us. But when we first started coming, it was just super clear about the mission and vision of UBC and what it was about. We also came right about the time that the deacons were getting ready to be installed. And so Jason and some of the other leaders were talking about that. And it was a unique setup that we'd never really been part of before, quite structured that way. So that's something that drew us here to UBC. So we're excited to be here, and I'm super excited to be part of this podcast.
Awesome. All right, Corey, let's hit you next. Tell us a little bit about your life, your family, and your time here at UBC.
Absolutely. So I've been married to my wife, Krisha, for 12 and a half years. We have 4 children.
Wait a minute. All of us so far, 4 kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
okay.
so.
Go ahead. Sorry, Corey.
We are in a different stage. All of ours are 6 and under. So our house is loud and a good time. So it's 6 down to almost 3 months to our youngest. By day, I am a product manager at Principal Financial Group, working on their engineering teams. And outside of work and stuff, stay pretty busy with church activities with our growth group and deacon stuff. I enjoy playing golf. People probably would not enjoy watching me play golf because you could not call it playing golf. It's kind of a different sport of do your best to hit it. And staying busy with the family. We homeschool as well with our 2 oldest, and we've been at UBC for, I want to say about 4.5 years, something like that. But
Wasn't your first members meeting where you and Krisha joined? Wasn't that the one that went the members meeting that went for like 5 hours or something crazy? It's like the only time that's happened since I've been pastor.
I was like, is this how all member meetings are? And they're like, we've never had one like this. And I was like, okay,
we haven't had one since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, Harry, over to you. Tell us about yourself, your family, and your time here at UBC.
So I came to faith as a teenager, and through college, I did a lot of personal study and growth. And Air Force was my career for 30 years. I met my wife on the second tour that I had, Sue, and we have 2 kids. My son is married, has 2 kids, both of which have now graduated from high school. My daughter is, Lord has kept her single, and she takes care of a family of probably about 12 kids and their kids, and it's just incredible what she's been doing. She lives out in Oklahoma. In terms of during the week, as I said, I retired from the Air Force several years ago. I spent a lot of time working around the church here and on staff in church. I worked for a contractor with Air Force work for several years. And right now I'm retired, I think, and helping Jim Corbin get some of the transition of stuff from when I was the Director of Finance and Facilities and the benefits of our staff.
Nice. So just for our listeners and even for the guys who are sitting in the room, we literally just decided to add Harry into this podcast like at the last minute because some of the questions we're going to talk about with the deacon body require knowledge of church history. And we were like, man, I've been here 8 years. The rest of you guys have been here less than that, except Harry, who's been here since the Old Testament. So we're glad to have Harry. 35 years worth of history here with us. So, all right, a little icebreaker question for us to get going. So you guys can just chime in as you want. As a deacon, what is the strangest request you've ever helped someone with? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll take one from many years ago.
Okay.
And just to put in context, when I was a deacon here, the deacons did far more than they ministered to everybody that came in, whether they were members or not members. So we were in the kitchen in the NPR and got a phone call, and it was somebody was asking for some help. They had come to Dayton because they had a court case. It was too far to drive back that night, and they wanted some help with a hotel. Now that wasn't the strange part. My next thing was, did you call here last year with this exact same request about this time? And it was kind of like silence, and that took care of that request, I guess.
Okay, so they were repeating a request for
somebody
a hotel.
was with exact same MO, exact same thing. So,
all right, gotcha. What about you guys? Anything else that's come up that stands out?
I've got one on just the pastoral care side, but it was definitely meeting a need. I think I was speaking at church that day. It's been several years back, and got a text from one of our members saying that his horse had died and wanting to know if I could come over afterwards and pray for him. And so after church, I ran out to a farm out in Beavercreek, where the horse is just laying there, of course, recently passed. And so I had a chance to pray for a man whose horse died. And it was a interesting experience, but it was super meaningful to him. So you get to care for people in all kinds of ways.
I've never heard that story before.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Gotcha. Corey, anything stand out?
My wife is a PA, and so sometimes we'll get, the like, hey, it's a medical thing, and like, I know this isn't really a church thing, but so we haven't had anything too strange. We get random needs. Sometimes we're talking before, whether it's transportation stuff or medical stuff, a lot of it is not necessarily been strange, but also things that are not necessarily predictable,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're the one who, when I was out of a car, like I had to talk to you and you had some sort of a vehicle sitting in your driveway or something that hadn't been driven for years, and you resurrected it from the dead.
Right.
And
shout out to Covenant Automotive for helping resurrect 2005 4Runner.
Jeremiah, anything stand out for you?
Nothing too crazy. The thing that comes to mind, we had, I guess it's more of a shock than anything, where I was like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be a request, but it was more of just like wanting to meet with elders about just not being able to serve or not feeling like they could serve. And so that took me off guard a little bit because I was like, oh, like you're ready. Like, cause I just kind of introduced myself to this couple, and then to be kind of like them open up immediately and be like, I need to talk to staff.
Oh, so you were their deacon.
Yes.
And they said, hey, we'd like to talk with you or one of the elders about
and
our challenge.
Like, okay,
serving.
well, I need to coordinate this with Jason and Phil.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good stuff. All right. So Deacon Ministry, taking care of lots of different types of business in the church, which is cool. Just another little kind of introductory question, but I'm sure that none of you, grew up in your elementary years thinking, man, one day I want to grow up and be a deacon in the church. So how did God lead each of you into the deacon ministry? Bill, I'm going to have you pass on this one because you haven't actually served on a deacon here, but Harry, Corey, Jeremiah, how did you end up getting led into this ministry?
So I'll start. The deacon ministry here is unique, and I've gone to probably four churches. I was thinking the other day, I've gone to 4 different churches in 40 years of my life. And what's consistent is the deacon ministry is probably a little bit different at every one of those locations and how it's structured. And one thing that I saw in every church growing up and, going throughout the years of my life, I've seen a big need for care. And you have care for others outside of the church. You may have missions trips, but care inside of the church. And how does that look? And how do you function? How do you organize those things? And how do you handle that? How do you have ears to the ground to some of the things that members need or others around you, especially when you have maybe a structure where there's maybe one teaching pastor or a couple. And so just seeing the need in the church for that, and then coming to UBC, seeing the model here was really encouraging. And I feel like it's one of those positions that really it's a great way to serve, and you get to know so many people, and you get to hear their stories. And honestly, one of the coolest things is just being in the front seat of watching God work in our members and their lives. And you get to kind of just be there and be captive to what God's doing. And you're like, wow, this is incredible to see all this. Yeah.
So you grew up though, like seeing the church's need to care for the members. Mm-hmm. You've been part of different models. Yeah. Had you served as a deacon in any of your other previous churches? No, I had not served as a deacon. Cause a lot of the other churches that a lot of the model there was, they would be head of a ministry or, head of hospitality or head of kids, children's ministries. And so I never really had been a part of those things. Really, my biggest, where I'd serve the most in some of the other churches was in, small groups, house churches. But not as the office of deacon. Correct. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So you ended up making your way into this through the typical like nominating process. Your name was recommended, prayed about it. The Lord led you into the ministry here. Is that right? Yep. Absolutely. Oh, cool. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So Corey, let's go to you next. How did you find your way into deacon ministry?
Yeah, I've been, going to church my whole life, but I don't think I had really been to a church that had what I would call a deacon ministry prior to being at UBC. Many of the churches had elders, but if they did have, deacon ministry, it was at a level where it was more administrative, to where I wasn't really aware of it at that age, at least. And so coming to UBC, that was something that, you learn about pretty quickly as you start attending. And then when you become a member, you get assigned a deacon. And so you get kind of, that side of the experience to see what that's like. And then getting into the ministry was really through the nomination process and going through that and just praying together as a family and feeling like, yeah, okay, this is something that we feel like we might be able to help with. And UBC, there's, I think every year there's need for more deacons, right? And
I think about what you just said though, like when you joined the church as a member, yeah, a deacon got assigned to you and your family. That's an initial exposure to the deacon ministry here at the church. If that goes well, I'm assuming people would say, hey, this is valuable, this is meaningful in our church, and kind of get introduced to it that way. And then I remember when you first came too, we talked a little bit about like your desire to use your teaching gifts and things like that in the church, which over the years now has come to fruition. But you didn't start out using your teaching gifts. You started out more in like small group leadership and also like in serving as a deacon, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, it's one of the major benefits, I think, when you serve as a deacon is you get to know so many families within the church. You get to know other, deacon men and their families. And I think that at a church really of any size, sometimes it can feel hard to make an initial connection. And then if it's a large church, it's hard to feel like really connected and people. And I think the amount of connection and that we have felt has been exponential since starting to serve as a deacon. I don't think when I first came on as a deacon, generally we try to say, hey, here's the families who are assigned to you. We try to at least give you a couple that for whatever reason, it didn't work out that way. I didn't know any of the families.
Meet them all brand new.
Yeah, they were all people I'd never met before, which is great. And now I've had those people for 3 years, right? And so we've been able to form relationships, and had people over for dinner, or their kids will come over and play with our kids, and it's really been a blessing to experience that. And that's, to your point, has enabled other opportunities to serve within the church as well.
All right, now Harry, I'm fascinated to hear. I don't know if we've ever talked about this for you. All right, now I'm sure you could tell us an hour worth of stories, but I just want to hear, how did you get started in deacon ministry at UBC? What led to that?
Well, prior to that,
did Moses ask you personally? I think is what he's
Jethro said, "Put your hands on."
Actually, Harry. It's Abraham, but that's okay.
Abraham.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Wow. Okay.
So I early on, I'd understood that serving was something that God had given me a real gift for. And so we were stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, working in a very small country church down there at Rosamond. And they asked if I'd be willing to be a deacon. And I said yes, and served there for 3.5, 4 years. And so, and then as we moved on to other locations, sometimes the opportunity presented itself, sometimes not. In the Air Force, since you're typically on a 3-year or less assignment, at least we were, and many of the deacons required 3 years worth of commitment. We just couldn't serve at those churches because of that. Didn't mean didn't serve, just not as a deacon. So when we came here, I just felt that the Lord opened up that opportunity, and I was willing to take it. Much smaller church at that time, and it was an opportunity just to be able to meet the needs of people.
For sure. So, looking forward to talking with you more about your history with the church, and you've seen the stages of growth and the transition from deacon model and all the things we'll get into in a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about deacons in the Bible, some of the biblical foundation for the ministry of deacons. We've got a few questions I want to ask. I'm just going to call on each of you one at a time. And if you're like, hey, I don't feel comfortable answering that one, then just call on whichever guy you want to put on the spot. Okay. So first one, let's see here. Jeremiah, we'll start with you. What are deacons?
So I would say a deacon is really there to assist the elders of our church in any service that would support and promote the ministry of the word. I think obviously that's a big piece you see in Acts. That's the very first example, is seeing deacons step up and deal with some conflicts that are happening in the church to care for people, especially widows, and free up men who are elders to teach and preach the word.
Okay. So like every January, I try to teach the church about this introductory level stuff of difference between elders and deacons. And one thing that I try to say regularly in summary form is that elders are the pastoral shepherds of the church. Deacons are really the leading servants of the church. And, elders tend to focus on spiritual care and spiritual guidance. Deacons focus really on practical service needs, making sure members aren't overlooked and things. That's not to say that the work of the deacon is not spiritual or godly in nature. It's just a little bit of a delineation there. And I think you're right. The work of the deacons does free up the elders to be able to focus on the ministry of the word and that type of thing. So I think that's really good. All right. So I'll ask you, Bill, next. What comes to mind when you think of where we see the role of deacons in Scripture?
So we see in the New Testament, in 1 Timothy and also in Titus, just this description and qualifications of what deacons should be. And no person, no man alive, fits all those to the 100% T. But these are the overall character qualities that we want to see. Some of those are things that God's just placed in them, like Harry said, about just a heart to serve and to care for people. And other ones are things that they've, because of their track record or because of their growth, that they have actually demonstrated faithfulness and some of the qualities where, again, these are things that just based upon a period of time that you've been able to practically see in their lives, in those qualifications.
So you would say 1 Timothy 3 obviously gives the qualifications of deacons very explicitly. Acts 6 in the early church there, would you say yes or no? Is that a passage on deacons or not?
I think it's a passage on people who are serving, as there was a great need to show up. So yeah, this is where we would see the deacons, the ministry start.
Okay.
So yeah.
So yeah, we call it the prototype. Like they don't get that title of deacon in that text, but we call it kind of the prototype of deacons. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, Bill. All right. So next one up. Okay. So we already kind of talked a little bit about how the role of deacon is different from elder, but Harry, I wanted to ask you, because you are an elder in our church, but you've also served as a deacon. Would you say that deacons are simply elders in training?
Not necessarily. And understand, in our church, we've not always had elders. And I remember a conversation several years ago where one of the deacons was basically observing that we basically had within the deacon body probably two or three men that basically served as elders as well as deacons. So where we are at this point, we have those two roles separate. And the roles are separate in the sense that an elder is led and called in a sense to that ministry, and much different than the deacon ministry. And there are some men that are very much hands-on and very good at that and meeting those physical needs. And some of them are also, and then other men are very good in terms of meeting spiritual needs, less physical, but more into the depth of life.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's a really important thing to make clear. Like we have dozens of men serving as deacons right now. They are not all kind of on a track or that's not a stepping stone into elder ministry. But for some of them, they have served as deacons and then become elders down the road. So you're one of those gentlemen, Harry. You've done that. Jeff Van Scoy's done that. Tim West, Glenn Dewar, Jim Corbin, Rich Porter, right? So I'm thinking about these guys who that's been their call, but then we've had lots of other deacons who have served on the deacon body, but have not sensed the call to step into eldership, right? All right. So Corey, what would you say is maybe one or two things maybe that people they often just misunderstand about the ministry of the deacons?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to the point we were talking about earlier of there are, I think the New Testament isn't overly prescriptive on what is a deacon and
is or is not.
Is not
okay.
Overly prescriptive on, this is exactly what a deacon does and how it does it. And so we see within the church, many different churches institute the role of deacon differently. And so I think everybody, for the most part, kind of comes in with their own, background of, I think a deacon does this because that's what I've seen at a different church. And so I think everybody comes in with an understanding of a deacon is somebody who is serving at the church in some office, but what that office looks like can be different. And so I think that plays a big role. I also think people think they need to have some sort of spiritual calling to be a deacon and they're like, I'm just a regular guy, and I love the Lord. I take care of my family. I'm a good steward of my stuff. Like, does that make me qualified to be a deacon? And so I think for many, it's the first office that they maybe enter into within the church. And so there's some reluctance there because they feel this this need to have, been handed tablets from Sinai that says like, you're qualified to be a deacon sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And I think maybe the last thing would be that they have to have all the answers or know how to do everything. And, it really is a community of deacons that are helping to serve. There's not an expectation that any one deacon, has it figured out or, has all these different skills and like that. It's just, we're a group of men who have been installed by the church to serve our members. And like, we're going to work together to do that as best we can.
Amen. So, all right. So laying the biblical foundation, we've got Acts 6, the prototype. We've got 1 Timothy 3, which is the passage about qualifications. There's some mention of deacons elsewhere through the New Testament, but those are the two key passages in the New Testament. We've talked about how elders are different from deacons. We've talked about some misunderstandings, but I want to talk a little bit more about what it looks like here at UBC. All right. So I think even already we've started this conversation, like assuming that people know a little bit about what the deacons do. I want you guys just to say, like, what do the deacons actually do in our church? How do they care for the needs? What sort of needs do deacons generally encounter? So take that where you want to go, whichever one of you guys wants to chime in. Let's talk about what deacons do in our church.
Well, one big way the deacons definitely prepare and serve communion, Lord's Supper. So I think that's one of the biggest ways, and just the administration of, filling juice cups to cracking crackers and putting them in there and setting them up on Sunday and getting volunteers in their positions where they need to be at a certain time. And but it's one of the coolest things I think personally I enjoy about serving as a deacon is being able to serve the Lord's Supper. It's a humbling thing, and it's really cool. So
awesome. That's a great point. I don't know if everybody, when they think about deacons, I don't know in our church if they would think right away that's what our deacons do, but our deacons get to do that, and they get to serve that communion alongside of their spouse, right? It's not exclusively served by the deacons themselves, but oftentimes alongside their spouse and stuff, which is cool. All right, what else do deacons do in our church?
Yeah, I'd say just speaking in broad terms, right? They're there to provide and help with practical needs of members. We have a different team at UBC that helps with non-members, attenders. Deacons only deal really with members at UBC. And so practical needs, and sometimes that's things like a family's having a baby. And so can we coordinate a meal train, right, to come alongside them and support them as they're going through, this season of change and transition. A big one is medical needs. People are, maybe they're going to be in the hospital for, a surgery, or they're going through cancer treatment. There's just a lot of practical stuff that needs to happen to help those families. And whether that's showing up to the hospital and just visiting with them and praying for them, or whether it's, a meal train sort of thing, or, hey, you're going to be here for a while. Do you have people to cut your grass, right, while you're gone?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. And then I would say too, there's just kind of the day-to-day stuff, right, where a family might say, hey, we're going to be visiting family, right, from out of state. And it's always kind of tough for us. Like, would you be praying for us? And yeah, absolutely. So I think generally it's a lot of the practical needs, and some seasons it's a lot of check-ins and, hey, how's things going? Things are great, praise the Lord. And for some folks, for other seasons, that's, their practical needs are many because of what they're going through. And so it can vary quite a bit from family to family, but hopefully that helps kind of paint a picture of the types of things that, you might be dealing with.
So serving communion, benevolence type care when needs arise, prayer for ongoing prayer for people. I would say too, another thing that the deacons do, not all the time, but from time to time that helps the church, is they give feedback to the elders. Here are some things going on. We would welcome the input of the deacon body. And so that's another thing that the deacons do that I think is really important. So the deacons provide this practical care for the households of church members. How many households does one deacon usually serve?
Yeah, the answer is that it's going to vary depending on how many deacons we have serving right that particular year.
Let's just say this year, like, reflecting on the past 12 months,
Yep.
what's maybe a range of, best that you can, range of the number of
It's
households?
like 16 to 20.
16 to 20 households?
Yeah.
Per deacon?
Yeah.
That's more than I would have expected.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is, we had, in one quarter, because we add members quarterly, and one quarter we had, 90 families, right? So like this past year, we had a large influx of members. We only had deacons once a year. And so it can kind of get outpaced sometimes depending on the amount of members who are coming in, the amount of deacons who have rolled off or are rolling on. But we've been very blessed to have an increase in the number of deacons each year for the last few years. If the current nominations for those who would serve as deacons are passed this month, then we'll have another record high. We'll be at, I think, 40, 42, 45. It's got the 5 signal from Bill. 45 deacons, which is far and away the most we've ever had. And so obviously the more deacons we have, right, the easier it is to kind of spread that out. And then the last couple of years, we've also had a new campus, which is a first for UBC.
Sure.
And so having Deacon Ministry, one deacon body, but serving 2 campuses with that, also that campus planning on becoming autonomous. And so trying to encourage and develop deacons who are serving over there to be equipped to do that well when they become autonomous.
All right. So generally, though, the range would be 15 to 20 households. Yeah. I think that I'd like us to use the word households rather than families, because I think sometimes it gives the impression that, everyone who joins our church is like in a multi-person family, when they're really not. Sure. We have a lot of single people, a lot of college students, right? So I get it that like 15 to 20 can be a lot. But I do remember, just for perspective, the first or second year that I was here, Harry, you were a deacon at that point. We had some deacons who were serving 40 or 45 households in the church at that point. So we've made some good progress on bringing the ratio down. And I think ideally we'd like to see it down even somewhere between like 10 to 15 or something like that households per deacon. So, all right, let's switch topics a little bit. So when it comes to deacons serving, they carry a load, they care for people, and they do that for a certain amount of time. What's the time limit? Like, are there term limits if you join the deacon body? How long do you serve?
So our deacons, according to our bylaws, are able to serve 2 years as a 2-year term with an optional 3rd year. And we've had many deacons pick up that 3rd year. Corey, you're part of that crew as well, but bylaws say that you can't serve that 4th year, so you have to roll off. We call those sabbatical deacons. They're still a deacon. You're just taking a break year. Jeremiah, you're coming back on, having been off that year. So yeah, 2 years with that optional 3rd year. And that really gives some consistency, I feel like, with connections from the deacons to those families. And the deacon chair has a big job of reassignments and everything like that, but it's a great structure.
Why is the term limit thing important?
I think we want to give deacons a chance to rest. I mean, the investment, specifically this year, man, there's just been some heavy things going on, good things, but just a lot of care. And our deacons serve faithfully. And I mean, it's a lot. And they do it with joy. But just giving them that break, I feel like, is really going to allow them, like in Jeremiah's case, coming back on to be refreshed, reinvigorated, and like, I can do this for a few more years as well. So
yeah, the rest factor is a huge deal, and hopefully it refreshes them to continue to want to serve and re-up in the future. Just speak your heart, guys. Why is the ministry of the deacons important? Maybe another way to state that question is, what would our church lose if nobody stepped into the role of deacon? If there was no deacon body, what would be missing?
So I know one thing that was eye-opening for me in serving 3 years as a deacon here was I think some people are willing to be forthright and share exactly what's on their heart, what their needs are. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people are like, that's cool, thanks for being a deacon, but what's been really neat, I think, is just to be there, to be present, and asking how we can be praying, how we can be caring for one another. The ears to the ground for the elders, I think, is key, because a lot of times I think people just sending and touching base at least once a month, or having that relationship, really opens the door for them to feel comfortable with sharing, hey, I have a need, or I need this prayer, or I need an elder to be involved with this very specific thing. What do I do? Or maybe it's a marriage thing. Maybe it's somebody's struggling in their marriage, and you're praying for very specific things about their marriage or their life. And then you're like, okay, this is actually something that I'm going to encourage them to reach out to an elder to talk more about. So I think one of the biggest things I've seen is just being there and asking how we can pray, how we can serve you, opens doors to, even if it's not right now that you can be served, when they do have something that comes up, they go, it's like they think of it like, I should actually text or call my deacon right now and let's talk about it.
So yeah, part of the value is like giving members like a clear, welcoming, invited way to say, hey, when something's going on, here's my path forward. Talk to my deacon, work with my deacon. If that wasn't there, man, I mean, if the deacons weren't involved, I mean, we'd have a lot of people, to use the Acts 6 term, being overlooked, right? Their needs would go unmet. So that's a huge deal. What else, as you guys think of it, anything else that you would want to add to why the deacon ministry is important and what would be missing in our church without it?
I think kind of going back to the Acts 6, there's the, making sure that the needs, right, aren't overlooked. There's also the freeing up of the elders for preaching, right, and for teaching and prayer. And so I think that if the deacon ministry weren't present, that would require the elders to try to serve in a lot of these capacity. We just talked about 20 families for a deacon. That could be a lot to manage. Well, what happens when you have now less than a dozen people who have to manage all of these families, in addition to the preaching of the word and all these things? And so there's the actual care for the member and making sure that's happening. And the other side of that coin, in many ways, is the freeing up of the elders for the preaching of the word and ministry.
Amen. That's a huge factor. And really, it brings me back to like small churches who are usually led by a solo pastor, and oftentimes maybe not even have a deacon body. They carry a ton of load, right? In some ways, being a small church pastor is much harder than being a large church pastor. But in whether your church is big or small, having qualified deacons to serve alongside you is such a huge, huge blessing. Harry, you were going to say something else to this?
I was going to say the other thing that strikes me is that what we would lose is some members. That there is a sense in which you join a church because of the communion, the compassion, the companionship that you have. And if you don't tend to sense that within the body, then oftentimes you'll go elsewhere where you can find it. And so it meets a need that is sometimes unspoken, but is very critical.
Very good.
Harry, I just want to share a quick little story here that on that note, a couple years ago, we had a member named Elaine, and she was invited to come to our church by another older lady in our church. And when she was going through the membership process, I said, why do you want to join UBC? And she said, my friend said, hey, listen, you're getting a little bit older. You need a deacon. And she said, I realized I need a deacon to help care for me as a single older lady, to just help navigate some things. And we got to care for her for a couple years, just in that capacity. And, having a deacon is truly that point of contact, like it's been shared. And it's such a joy to serve in a church that has that as we care for people.
Yeah. And Elaine has since gone on to be with the Lord. And Harry, you were right alongside her family when all that happened as well. So yeah, I remember that story. I mean, that's a good lead into the next question, which is, we need to be, careful not to share any sort of confidential details, but as much as we can and should share, what are some of the significant and memorable moments from serving that you guys have, from serving as a deacon, that really, they kind of just emphasize why this ministry matters, right? What comes to mind as you guys think about that?
I'll jump into one. And again, back at the time, we didn't have elders, but I was visiting with a couple. The wife was going through rehab at the time. This was late in the afternoon, and I got a phone call that one of the members was at the hospital. Her husband was in ICU and not likely to make it. And I remember calling my wife Sue and telling her I'd be home late. Went over to the hospital, spent most of the rest of that evening with this grieving woman as her husband was trying to breathe. Ultimately, in this particular case, we were praying for him. I was in the room. The doctors and nurses gave me the latitude to be there. And in the last about 30 seconds of this individual's life, he remarkably came awareness of things. And I think we're very clear that he probably came to Christ in those last few seconds.
Wow.
And so just being able, and then just helping take care of this individual's needs the rest of that evening and then over the next couple of days was just a very, very profound and meaningful event.
Wow. Man, that's powerful. That's amazing. What else kind of stands out to you guys as you think of outstanding moments and times as deacons?
So I know one of the first on my list of people to care for as a deacon, there was a young lady. She was recently divorced. Came to really get to know her story a little bit, and pretty soon after got news that her brother had committed suicide.
Wow.
And then on top of that, her dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And then on top of that, she had one of her teenage daughters was kind of going through deconstruction of sorts of her faith. And so just a lot to carry for this young woman, and just being able to come alongside her early on. And my wife, Emma, being one of the best partners in ministry for that, because just allowing Emma to, open up our place, open up opportunities to talk and pray with her, really just created just some special moments for my family. And then just to see how God worked through all of that, because she also then lost her job pretty soon after that.
Wow.
So it felt a little bit like a Job kind of thing, right? Where she's just like, man, like what's going to happen next? Is there anything else you can take from me, Lord? And coming alongside of her and really encouraging her with the truth of the gospel, but also just ways to serve her practically. And then my wife jumping in, like I said, and really serving her, and then seeing God move and healing her dad and getting her a job that, pulled her through the summer months and got her to another job that was even better than her first job. And just so many ways that God provided through such a tragic thing, and seeing her faith, you could just see it like kind of just grow in front of us, and her trust for the Lord and his provision and his faithfulness. And so I just felt like that was a special thing to see, like on the outset, like this is the first kind of exposure to me serving as a deacon, and to have that was like really special.
Wow.
So.
What about you, Corey, as you think about standout moments?
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprised me and has kind of illuminated for me the need for deacons is I've been surprised the number of families who have wanted to introduce my family to other members of their family, right? And whether that's for like, hey, this is this person, and like they're a really big part of my family, can you be praying for their salvation? Or they have family who sometimes is in town, like, oh, I want you to meet so and so. And it's been interesting just as I've reflected on the impact that the church can have, right? You're ministering to a person, but that person is part of a whole community, right? And a family, and just the impact that a deacon can have, that, and maybe you'll never see, right, what that leads to. But I like to imagine there are many people who have had their view of the church maybe challenged or changed from seeing, oh, there's this family member of mine, whether it's an unbelieving spouse or it's just, a relative, and seeing the church come alongside that person and serve them well and be there for them, and go, oh, maybe the church does care for people. And, does try to act like Jesus. And so that has been really cool to see it just in small ways. Like I've said, introductions to family, and then that kind of building bridges to relationship and care. And I think that it's in many ways the deacon ministry serves as a validation or a proof, right, of the love of Christ and how that's being demonstrated. And that can be a powerful form of evangelism.
For sure. I mean, it's the hands and feet, the practical work, we're going beyond just words and into deeds. There's a powerful witness there. Just to kind of share my experience, when I first came to UBC 2018, I remember things that stand out to me. First of all, I came here from a church that did not have the office formally of deacons. So I'm watching and observing how deacons work. I remember the first time I ever saw the deacons serve communion at our church. And I remember just thinking, wow, these are the men who the church has recognized as godly servants. And that stood out to me. Like, man, they're serving us the Lord's Supper. I remember the first time I ever had to do a hospital visit here at UBC. I heard about somebody who had a heart issue. I went up to the hospital to visit this person. And as I was walking in, that guy's deacon was already walking out because he beat me there. I was like, oh, look at this guy. That was awesome to see, like, that kind of first responder mentality of the deacons. I remember, Harry, you'll remember this. I remember when the deacons used to have our deacons meetings on a monthly basis, and everybody would get together and pray for the members. And I remember Jim Jennings praying, weeping, with just his heart laid bare before the Lord, with care for the members. And those things just stood out to me. And having come from a church where we didn't have a formal deacons ministry, it was so powerful for me coming in to see, like you said, Corey, it just makes an impression that there's real people here doing real care for the members. So you guys have already shown that deacon ministry is not merely practical, fleshly, tangible stuff. I mean, there really is spiritual care. In fact, the things that all of you mentioned are very much spiritual in nature that stand out to you. So I know that there are other times when things are, I'll say, so spiritually serious that you feel the need to escalate that up to the elders from time to time. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But for now, I think it's good. We've talked about what deacons are. We've talked about the biblical basis for them. We've talked about some of the standout moments that you guys have had for member care. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back after this break, we'll talk a little bit more about becoming a deacon in our church, some of the history of the deacon body, and then we'll get into other things like women in our church and how wives and other women are involved in the deacon ministry. And we'll wrap up with some closing thoughts. So we'll be right back after this short break. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. If you like what you're hearing, you can find all of our episodes at ubcbeavercreek.com/podcast. There you can find all of our episodes, guest bios, and ministry resources. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes are published, please like, subscribe, or follow wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, that's ubcbeavercreek.com/podcast, and you can find that link in the podcast notes. Thanks for listening. Now back to the episode. All right, welcome back into the Talking Points podcast. We are talking about the ministry of deacons. We've covered a lot of ground with what the biblical foundation for the ministry of deacons looks like, what the practical part of serving as a deacon at UBC looks like. I do want to talk a little bit more about basically the deacon body here at UBC. And I want to start out by talking about how somebody actually becomes a deacon in our church in an official capacity. So, Corey, I'll turn this one over to you. How does somebody even become a deacon at UBC? We have a nomination vetting process. Give us a quick overview of what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously you need to be a member in good standing, right? That is kind of the base qualification. I think something even in that most people don't think about is, well, what are our requirements to be a member in good standing? We expect members to be serving. We expect members to be giving financially to the church. Nobody tracks what dollar amount. It could be $1 or $1,000, where it doesn't really matter, right? But what are the requirements is serving and giving.
Yeah. Since I've come, we've said there's 4 requirements really of members: worship, connect, serve, and give.
Yep.
Right. So go ahead. I don't want to keep talking.
No, you're good. So, having those aspects of, that's what we expect of members. We do have people who start going through the deacon process, and we find out that they're not doing one of those things. And so our, challenge to them is, hey, you need to be doing one of those things before you can be, or you need to be doing all those things, before you can really serve as a deacon. And so being a member in good standing, so you're doing those things that is required of membership at UBC, and you've been a member for at least 6 months. Then in January every year, we send out a nomination form that has all of the available candidates, so people who meet those requirements in terms of membership.
Any age?
Any age. It's, I believe, 18 or older. And from then, that is sent to all of the members at UBC. They are then able to fill out that form and nominate any of those people for deacon, elder, or both either. And so those nominations are then collected and they get sorted through, and then begins the reaching out process of letting folks know, hey, you've been nominated. Are you interested? And that's kind of the first step is, are you interested in serving in this capacity?
Corey, talk about who actually does the reaching out.
Take a guess. It is the deacons, right? Now, if it's an elder, it will be the elder body who does that. But if there is a nominated person for deacon, they will get assigned to a deacon liaison, and they will reach out to this person and say, hey, are you interested? If yes, then they start going through that process. The process looks like an initial questionnaire that they fill out and then is reviewed. Things like, spiritual beliefs and habits and, what do they do? How do they lead their family? That sort of thing. And then from there, they go into a multi-step interview process. So there is an in-home visit. So 2 deacons will come out to the home. And that's also a great opportunity to meet with, if that person is married, meet with their spouse, their wife, and make sure that they understand the requirements, what the process looks like, answer any of their questions, that sort of thing. And then the next step would be what's called a cohort interview. So deacons are grouped into cohorts. 5 or 6 deacons are put into a cohort together. And
we'll
each
talk
cohort,
more about that in just a second.
Okay. Yeah. So each cohort then will interview one of those deacons. They'll talk more about their questionnaire, their answers, give them some scenarios, that sort of thing. And just do that sort of interview. And that's usually held here at the church. Then once that person has completed that step, all of the deacons who have made it that far will then be sent to the elders for a final review. And then that list of approved nominees is sent out to the church to be voted on at the summer members meeting. Once they're approved, they would roll on. So they'll be approved in June here, July. They will be installed and begin be assigned families and serve their 2 to 3 year term.
Okay. So basically, if you're a good guy who's been at the church for a while and gives a lot of money, you can be a deacon.
No. If you are a good guy, you've been at the church for a long time and you know a lot of people, there's a good chance you'll get nominated, right? Because people know you and they're like, oh, this is a good guy. And I think he would serve well. But being nominated is definitely not the same as being installed as a deacon. You have to go through the process. No one person, as the deacon chair, I can't just say, oh, hey, my buddy, over here, why don't you just come be a deacon with us? That's just not how the process works. And so there's a lot of vetting, and, we want to make sure that our members are being cared for by spiritually qualified men.
Yeah, definitely. So that vetting process, takes place basically from January to June. Yeah. So from start to finish, it's about a 6-month process. Yep. A few of those months in between are pretty heavily focused on the vetting aspect, which is good. But, not every man that gets nominated ends up on the deacon body. And not even every man that gets invited and accepts an invitation into vetting ends up on the deacon body. So they don't all end up that way. And that ends up leading to, sometimes we have to tell guys no, or sometimes guys themselves realize, oh, I'm not yet qualified. And they kind of recuse themselves from the process. And that turns into some good opportunities for discipleship. Bill, tell us a little bit about how that nominating, vetting process can become an opportunity for discipleship in the lives of men in our church.
Yeah, as I've seen this very slow, well thought through process take place, I've seen all along the questionnaire process into the different kind of interviews, all along the way over the past couple of years that I've been helping with the Deacon Ministry, is there will be certain times when men realize, or it's brought to their attention, here's just an area of growth in your life. So maybe they realize it, maybe either the elders or the other deacons in the cohorts in these interviews realize, hey, here's an area of growth. Well, it would be easy just to say, hey, good luck, work on this year, and we'll try it again next year. But we actually intentionally go through and we have processes in place where we say to a man, hey, listen, we don't think this is the year for you to serve as a deacon. So what we're going to do is we're going to pair you up with a older, more mature, spiritually mature man to walk with you this next year. And here is a game plan that we've come up with, very specific things, so that we hope that next year you're going to re-enter this process again, and we're going to be able to say, yeah, I've walked with this man for the past 12 months. I've seen growth in his life, and yes, I feel like he's ready to continue on through the process and would serve well as a deacon. In my time here, I've walked with a man during a year, and at the end of that year, he still just was not ready to step into that role of deacon. I will also say this year, we have one of the deacons that I've walked with this past year, and there's some areas of growth in his life that we talked about, and he is being presented here next week to the church body in the quarterly member meeting to serve as deacon. But I can personally say, like I've seen his growth. I can testify to this as well. So all along the way, as deacons, as the men are questioned, again, it's a great discipleship opportunity that we, again, are super intentional about doing as well. So that's one of the things that I love about the Deacon Ministry also.
Yeah. And I have to say kudos to you, Bill. I mean, I think that's been a part of your leadership amongst our elders. The Lord has obviously gifted you with a shepherd's heart, and you're thinking about these guys. You don't just want to tell them no and then leave them out there to kind of figure it out. It's like you're the one who really introduced this idea of guys being on a care plan, a growth plan that, Lord willing, will help facilitate them if the Lord leads coming on the deacon body down the road when they're qualified or things change or whatever. So kudos to you for that. And, it's been a joy to walk with some of the guys through that process. All right. So kind of piggybacking off of this, we've talked a little bit about how the deacon body works in our church right now and, some of the realities of that. But I want to talk a little bit about how that's played out over the years. And Harry, you're going to have to speak to this a little bit. So let's have a little dialogue between me and you. Years ago, UBC operated under a deacon board with a solo, like a senior pastor led model with a deacon board. I know I kind of vaguely mentioned it there, but just tell us what the structure looked like.
Well, as was indicated, there was a lead pastor or a single pastor. Initially, we didn't have, the only staff we had was a secretary, and the body of deacons basically took care of most of the rest of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of the needs of the individuals, the needs of families, the needs of visitors, the needs that came in off the street. That's what the body of deacons took care of. We would meet, I think, approximately monthly with the lead pastor. We would talk about things. But it wasn't near to the depth or precision that we've talked about, and you will talk about a little bit later in there.
So you've seen that change unfold. We made the shift from kind of a senior pastor led deacon and staff served church body. We made that shift to an elder led, congregationally ruled, deacon served body. We made that shift in 2021, right? Voted on it at the end of 2020, changed it 20. One of the things people ask all the time is like, why the change? What if people aren't used to an elder-led, deacon-served body and they're kind of used to the old Baptist way, that always comes up. Why are we making this change? I remember when I first came on board as the new lead pastor, and I was talking about implementing some of these changes. When people asked me why, it would sometimes be caveated with like, hey, like things are going well. You kind of get to make a lot of the decisions as senior pastor. Like, what's the problem? And so the why behind it, really, in case, people are wondering, is just trying to be faithful to what we see in Scripture. The more we study Scripture, we see churches with usually a plurality of biblically qualified deacons who spiritually shepherd, and a body of, did I say deacons? A body of elders, biblically qualified, with also a body of deacons who are biblically qualified that serve as well. And so the answer is, why make the shift? It's just to try to closer align with Scripture. It's as simple as that. And Harry, you were here. You've been here long enough to see the change, right? And the difference. I want to ask you two questions about that. The first one is, how has that change in our structure, how has it benefited the church?
Well, I think the real benefit, if I may comment it that way, we've not seen yet. The problem that we were encountering, and as Jason said, I've been here for a long time, and I will basically put it this way: I have seen Satan take out multiple pastors. Now, when you're a single pastor led with deacons, you go through a very troublesome time. So when the pastor resigns very quickly, your leadership is kind of gone. And it becomes the people that are there behind trying to pull the pieces together to continue to keep the church going forward. And so like I said, we've gone through this time and time again. And even before Jason came, we were beginning to look at the issue of what does an elder type of ministry within a church look like? And so we'd been interviewing some of the other churches in the association. We had one pastor that had instituted that in his church, had come to us, and he unfortunately was one of those spiritual casualties that Satan just took out within about 3 months or less. And so we were looking to find a little bit more stability, a little bit more understanding of how that helps the body make those transitions. And that's one of the things that was really driving a lot of this.
Well, think about the people who have been here a long time. Like, let's say they've been here, prior to me coming in 2018. They were here for years before that. What would you say are some of the changes that they would know now and have experienced now as, being a church member, like under the old governance model till now? What are some of the major changes you think they would have experienced?
Well, I mean, I think this is perfectly accurate. We've seen growth. We made a decision several years ago to go to a younger pastor's setup. We had gotten to the point where we were old, we were growing old quickly, and we knew that if we didn't make a change in the way that we brought in pastors and brought in the ages of them, we would not be here today. We wouldn't have been here 10, 15 years ago either. And so that coupled with the broader perspective of what an elder body brings a little bit of more stability to that growth and to those transitions that unfortunately churches go through.
So, I'm thinking like there's not a ton of people who were here like for 10 years before I was or something like that, but there are some. And I've got to say, like, they probably have had to make an adjustment of saying, I used to be able to just I knew who the single pastor was. I could just go talk to the pastor about things. And now there's a little bit more like other pastors. There's other deacons really that they go and talk to about many of their needs as well. I think about like the deacons in our church. When I came, I don't think they were trying to operate like elders. Right. So I think some Baptist churches have these structures where it's like you have a pastor, but then you have this deacon body that's trying to act with the authority of elders and things, and it creates power struggles and this type of stuff. I think I walked into a good situation where deacons were, actually already serving the members. They weren't trying to be pastors. You had some very godly men there who, loved the Lord and probably like you were called to serve as an elder. But, that's a change that I think many other churches have to adjust to, but not really us. I think that the deacon structure that existed before I came was already doing its job. And I think that's really good. So that's the way I'll just leave that there. All right.
Sounds good.
So it's one thing to serve as a deacon. It's another thing to be a leader of deacons within the deacon ministry. Right. We have some leadership structure within the deacon ministry itself. I do want to talk about that just a little bit because our deacon ministry has several leadership roles, right? We have a deacon chair, we have a deacon co-chair, we have cohorts and cohort leaders. We also have Bill as a staff member working with the deacon. So I just kind of want to talk about these. So Corey, why don't you talk to us first about what is the role of the deacon chair?
Yeah, it's a good question. The deacon chair is somebody who is there to lead the deacons as one of the deacons. And so
just boss everybody around, or
that's
what do
right.
you mean?
Yeah, it's a great gig. No. And I'll say I had a great example. My first year as a deacon, we had Jesse Jackson, who served as the chair. My next year, I served as co-chair under Jeremiah, who did a great job as the chair. And so the goal of the chair really is to make sure that the deacons are structured well. So helping make sure that cohorts are set up. They're there to oversee things like the family or household assignments, right, out to the different deacons. There's a lot of administrative things that go on with the deacon ministry, as you can imagine, with having all these different households and all these that have to be assigned out and all the different needs. And so coordinating a lot of that, meeting with the cohort leads. So that way anything that's going on within, a cohort can be addressed, or if there's any training that needs to happen or changes within the church that need kind of communicated down to the deacons. Setting up, we have all deacon meetings once a quarter. So setting the schedule for that and making sure that everybody's supported. Really the goal of the chair is to make sure that all of the things are set up so that way the deacons can focus on caring for households.
Okay. So there's a lot of coordinating. There is a setting of agendas for meetings. You also have to do the chair has to do the reports for the members meetings each quarter as well. If need be, if the deacon body needs to speak to the church in an assembly, like it's the role of the chair to speak on behalf of the deacons, right?
Yep. So oversee the nomination process as well, right? Which is, as you point out, about a 6-month process. And so it doesn't mean the chair is doing right all of those things, but they're helping kind of be the tip of the spear and make sure all that is coordinated and collecting. One of the big things that I didn't mention is we get updates from all the families every month, right? That's a big part of being a deacon is you should be contacting your family at least once a month, your households. And getting an update, how are they doing? And then we take that information, right? And we surface that to the elders.
Put it in a report.
We generate a report for that month. Here is the deacon, household member report. And it is, usually 40 to 50 pages of updates from all the different families. And so that's facilitating that sort of just understanding, transparency, allowing the elders to know what's going on within the church across all the different households within membership, that they wouldn't be able to have that sort of visibility unless there was some sort of collaboration effort happening at the deacon level to be able to generate a report like that and surface it.
Yeah. So it's a huge blessing to have somebody who steps into the chair role. And of course, having a co-chair beside you is crucial as well. But as the church gets bigger, we've had to break groups down into subsets and make sure, organizationally we're kind of scaling in various ways and all that. But one of the things you mentioned several times, Corey, was cohorts. Jeremiah, you served as the chair of the deacons, I think, if I remember correctly, when cohorts started up, right? Can you tell us what cohorts are and kind of why they were introduced?
Yeah, so Corey and Bill, keep me honest here because I know things are fluid and change year to year. But UBC bylaw 8.2.6, if people are keeping track at home.
Look at that. You're so precise.
Under the oversight of the body of elders, the body of deacons shall have flexibility to organize themselves in accordance with these bylaws in whatever manner best accomplishes their responsibilities. And so that was a big thing back in July of 2024. I spoke with Bill, and we were like, hey, we're getting pretty big here as a deacon body, which is a good thing. And so maybe we need to think about a little differently of how we can organize ourselves. Obviously, one of the things we initially thought of was, hey, we're meeting once a month with all the deacons, and this is a very large number of men to have in one room. And if we have any discussion whatsoever or want to have feedback, this meeting is going to go for 4 hours. And it's not fair to the other deacons' family and their time. And so how can we facilitate the administrative pieces, informing the different deacons of things that are happening in the church, things that are happening in the deacon body, things that are coming up on the schedule. And so we said, why don't we put together something called Cohorts? So when we started, we said, let's get 5 or 6 deacons in each cohort. Let's try to do this geographically so that, it makes it just simpler to meet more often in person. Some of the logistics there.
And I would add that was iterative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Much of the deacon ministry is iterative, right?
Yeah.
We just figured out like, oh, this worked or this didn't work. And right. That's the freedom that the church gives to the deacons, right? In terms of the bylaws is to figure that sort of thing out. And so originally, I believe we had it where we were trying different age groups within cohorts, right? We went, older men, younger men.
In the same group.
Right. But which was great, right? Had its benefits. But it was hard to meet together because we had folks who lived very far apart. And so we then iterated and went to more of the geographic model, which made meeting in person much easier and has been well received.
And let me just say, in God's sovereignty, as a little teaser, I think sets us up to be more ready and able to plant churches in the future with established leadership teams. More to come on that in a future podcast, but go ahead, Jeremiah.
That's a good call. Yeah. So really these groups were 5 to 6 deacons, as I said, and we assigned, we tried to seek out a cohort leader, somebody who was willing to kind of take the lead as far as like scheduling times, right, getting all the guys together at a certain time. Really, the goal of the cohort was to come together and support one another, encourage each other, pray together. So another thing we love to do when we had a smaller group of deacons was we'd love to just sit and pray for our families, pray over our families that we have assigned to us. It was a good time, but when you have that many deacons together, it just wasn't possible. So we had to break those groups out. And so cohorts allowed us to really have that time to do more of that as well. And then in those meetings, just really, if there's information that we need to share, or the elders will say, hey, we have some things coming up, we need to make sure this is shared with the deacons. Those types of logistical things can be shared then in those cohorts, passed through the deacon chair down to the cohort leads. So, yeah.
One benefit too of the cohorts is it also helps, I think, with member privacy. Right. So if there's a situation going on and the deacon, needs to discuss this with, other deacons to get some advice or get a feel for the situation, it gives them a group of just a handful of individuals who are, deacon qualified men. They can discuss this, and it doesn't, require opening it up to everybody. And so that's definitely another benefit it keeps things as tight as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. You only keep the circle as wide as it needs to be.
Yeah.
Or as small as it can be, I guess maybe is the better way to say that. Yeah, that's good. So I remember getting those established. That was a huge deal. So we've talked a little bit about the chair and the co-chair role. We've talked about the cohort and the cohort leader's role. And then we've got Bill as a staff member who's doing something alongside all these deacon brothers who are serving in cohorts and various things. So Bill, tell us a little bit about your role as it specifically applies to working alongside the deacons.
Well, it's a privilege, again, to be on staff and to work. My role primarily is to support the deacon chair really in carrying out the ministry of the deacons. I serve on the elder team as well, and I'm the liaison for the deacons to come back to the elder board with any kind of major thing that's going on or a particular initiative. But really, the deacons are the ones that do do the work here of ministry, and allow, again, the elders to shepherd people also. Some of the lessons that I've learned or that I'm seeing is just the humble heart of all the deacons. Like, they don't do this for public recognition or anything like that. These men are humble behind the scenes, caring for and praying for the members here at our church. The fun part, I guess, is to talk with other people within my just network of people that I've gone to college with or know in ministry as well, and just what a unique structure it is here at UBC. And it's great because I see real ministry happening through care, specifically with the deacons. And so one of the other kind of parts of my role is when it comes to any kind of financial benevolence, we do a lot of that here. The members have approved a really good chunk of change to be able to care for some of the tangible needs of the members. We've done everything from helping with put a roof on somebody's house and helping pay for that, to appliances and car repairs for college students who are broke, for our college members. So we've really had a good time with that. The other thing that we really help out a lot with is when people are needing some specific, let's say, expertise when it comes to counseling, good biblical counseling. And we've got some funds appropriated for that. We've got some good partners for helping get good care additionally. I know that we're Dan and Rachel and some of them on staff as well are developing leaders to do more biblical counseling. So part of my role, again, is helping to administrate those funds and then to be able to get those out as the deacons bring up different needs for member care.
I think you guys have found a good way to work together with you, Bill, like you said, primarily serving the needs of the chair and the co-chair. And then, it kind of filters down to cohort leaders and things from there. But then also, Bill, you are able to be on site day by day in the moment, being able to take care of certain things that come up, which I think is really, really good. I think underneath all of this is the heart of a deacon is a heart to serve, right? And that's what we see in Jesus. He's the servant leader extraordinaire. And so when we're looking for deacons, we're looking for men who have a heart to serve. Yet at the same time, the New Testament does give us specific qualifications that we are to look for in the character and the life of a deacon. And so, we're looking for that. And so far in the ministry of our church, we have basically talked about men serving as deacons, right? So I want to shift gears for just a second, and I want to talk about females in our church, the female aspect of deacon ministry, and kind of dig into that a little bit. So, what role do wives play in supporting a deacon ministry? And when I say wives, I'm talking about the wives of deacons, all right? What role does a deacon's wife play in supporting a deacon ministry?
I'll start. One of the things that we have as a policy, right, when a deacon is reaching out to a woman or a house that has a husband and wife, or maybe it's just a college student, the deacon is always to include their spouse, right, in any communication going out. And that's for multiple reasons. One is, right, just accountability. Another one is to make sure that woman knows that there's another woman that they have access to if they, have questions, or they have things maybe they're not, comfortable sharing with their deacon. They can, reach out to my wife, right, if they run into a particular situation. And so including the spouse on communications does that, where it provides not just the accountability, when we're communicating with other women in the church, but it also opens up a lifeline or a hotline to that woman to have somebody else who they can reach out to. And so that's a huge blessing to have. And there's also the practical side of, having a wife is helpful from, running a household and doing other things and whatnot. But in terms of how that I think is beneficial to our members, the wives of deacons are there to be able to support, the women in the church in ways that maybe it would be difficult or uncomfortable for the male deacon to do.
Yeah. So Bill, I'll just let you speak to this since you're one of our elders, but does a deacon have to be married? Does he have to have a wife in order to be on the deacon body?
Yeah, many years ago, this question was posed to me at a different church. And no, I don't think anywhere in the New Testament it requires, just because it says husband of one wife, I don't think that restricts only married men or disqualifies single men. We have several single deacons who do a fantastic job for serving. But no, I don't think it disqualifies them. But I think somebody maybe listening to the podcast today may pose that question. So what do you think on that one as well?
Yeah, I agree. No, you do not have to be married to serve as a deacon. If you are married, you need to be faithful to your wife. Being the husband of one wife does not mean never divorced. You could potentially be divorced, and that whole situation needs to be looked at and evaluated and, unpacked at a detailed level. But, we have men in our deacon body who are single, right? We have men in our deacon body who have been divorced and are now remarried. And I agree with Corey, like when you have a godly wife at your side, it will absolutely help you in ministry. And in your guys' case, specifically the ministry of serving on the deacon body. And I think that's part of why there are qualifications for a deacon's wife in 1 Timothy 3 that are there because, sometimes a man might be qualified, but his wife might not have the character. And that could make very difficult make some great difficulties in the church or in the life of the deacon and his household. Jeremiah, why don't you speak to this a little bit as well? Corey, if you want to jump in, that's cool too. But like, how have your wives helped you serve as deacons, more effectively?
Oh man. Yeah, it's a good question because I feel like there's no way I would be able to serve as a deacon with just, 4 kids at home, all the things that happen in the home, the logistics, as Corey kind of mentioned, and those things continue to go on, and you're also then trying to care for the needs of other people. And then there's just logistical things, right? There's meetings and getting communion together, the Lord's Supper, and so it does take time to serve and care well. And so when I'm away doing those things apart from the family, my wife Emma is the one that steps in and really takes an additional workload, especially, I'm working full time throughout the week. And then, she's hoping that the weekend is time that dad can kind of step in a little bit more and be more involved. And so if that time is then used to serve others at the church, that can be difficult. And so I'd say that's a big thing. And then also, I think just the encouragement of my wife, for her to pray for me specifically, encourage me as she sees, because there are times, that it gets hard. And when you're serving, it can take sacrifice. It can take energy away. It can take, there's all sorts of things, right? And so Emma's been right next to me, my biggest cheerleader, praying and also caring for the needs of the house. And that's just, there's no way I would be able to do it without my wife. So I'd say that's a huge, huge blessing to have a wife that's willing and ready. And honestly, that's when we do the in-home visits, that's one thing that me personally, when I go into a home of a deacon that's nominated, is asking.
You're talking about when they're in the vetting and
when they're in the
process.
vetting process. Like that's one of the first questions I would ask the wife is just like, how are you feeling? Kind of get a gauge of their service in this role, because you really need, if you have a family with a husband and wife and kids, you really need the wife to be willing to serve as well, because there's going to be several opportunities that they can serve alongside of you. So I think it's key. So.
Yeah, man. And no one can hold you more accountable than your wife.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
She knows you better than anybody else. No one can put more wind in your sails than your wife.
That's
with
right.
giving you encouragement and affirmation, that type of thing, which is wonderful. I'm going to kind of press us toward a conclusion. So I want to kind of keep us moving forward on this. Of course, the question when it comes to women in ministry in our church, the question would definitely come forward, and it already has come forward in our church, is can women serve in the office of deacon? And I just want to speak to that briefly here and then point people to another resource. But historically in the life of this church, as far as I know, Harry, and maybe you know differently than me, as far as I know, for the 55 or 60 years that UBC has existed, the office of deacon has only been held by men. Is that correct?
That's how I remember it.
Okay. And so presently in our bylaws, we state that the office of deacon can only be held by men. The church body has asked, maybe 3 years ago or so, people started to ask if the office of deacon would ever be opened up to women. The elders have done a multi-year study on that, a lot of back and forth and different conversations about it. And what I'm just going to say on this podcast is we have recently released our position paper on why we operate with a male deacon body only. We understand that different churches have different views on this, that for us, we don't consider it a primary or even a secondary issue. It's more of a tertiary issue for us. Nevertheless, operational decisions for a church have to be made day by day, and we have to make them for our church. And we wanted to put out a paper to the church explaining why we operate with a male deacon body only. So that paper's done. It's published to the church, available on the resources page of our website. And I think that as you read it, you'll see that it's what we're calling a charitable approach to why we have a male deacon body only. So we tried to write it with the spirit of love, a spirit of care, a spirit of understanding that different churches come to different conclusions. There are some things in scripture that are super black and white. There are other things that are more gray, especially as you study the original languages of the New Testament. This becomes a more gray issue. So we don't want to treat it like a black and white issue. Nevertheless, we had to make decisions, and our paper reflects the position of the elders. So I would just say, anybody listen to this pod, if you want to know more about that, go ahead and read that paper. Now, to wrap us up, I want to just kind of look forward a little bit, thinking about a call to action. Corey, I'll give this one to you. What would you say to a man who feels drawn to serving as a deacon? If you were just sitting down with a guy from your growth group, a guy you're discipling, whatever, and he starts to open up to you about that sense of being drawn into that ministry, what would you say to him?
Come on board.
Go
through the process. What I would say is I would definitely encourage that person just to continue on where they're at right now and serving, be faithful, and then, be open to the process if they get nominated and invited in. I think that, several people, they might wax and wane on their enthusiasm, for doing it. And it can be kind of a long process to go through it. So I would say, lean into that, be faithful where you're at. And then as the nomination season comes up, be willing to, do the work and go through that and go through the process. Make sure, if you're married, make sure you and your wife are on the same page around that and what it might look like. And maybe even feel free to reach out to your deacon and ask them a little bit about the process, and make sure you can have any questions answered on what expectations might look like. And but there's definitely a need for deacon qualified men within UBC and within any church. And so I think it would be something to encourage as much as we can.
Well, I love how you said it. Like, basically, right, keep an open heart. Like, if their heart is kind of feeling drawn, keep an open heart. I love how you said that. I love how you also encourage them to keep serving. That's what a deacon is, a servant, right? And also to start getting counsel from those who have served in that role. That's really good advice. Bill, what would you say to a man who is feeling like he's led to and maybe even desires to serve as a deacon, but he doesn't think he meets the qualifications? What would you say to that person?
I would say, number one, when tapped on the shoulder and said by a deacon to say, hey, you've been nominated to be considered. Number one, pray. God's going to bring all kinds of things to your mind. Secondly, I would say ask some other older men, maybe an existing deacon leader in the church, other men who you really admire or look up to spiritually, and maybe ask them, what do you think? And allow another man, Titus 2, to be able to guide you and give you some counsel, as we just looked at Proverbs, about, is this a wise decision? Do they feel like this is something that God wants them to do?
Amen. So obviously keep a spirit of prayer, get the godly counsel, allow other older godly men to speak into your life as to whether or not they see you meeting the qualifications or have some growth points. I think that's really good. Jeremiah, if there was a guy that is, I'll just ask about your experience. When you were thinking about stepping into serving as a deacon, did you ever wonder whether or not you were qualified?
Oh yeah, certainly. I know for me.
So you didn't know if you're qualified.
Yes.
Did that itself make you a little bit hesitant to maybe pursue the role? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Share your experience.
Yeah. So I was definitely hesitant at first. And I think fear just creeped in. Like as soon as somebody had mentioned it, fear just started to creep in. And I think part of this is probably Satan too, feeding lies to me, but it was like all of my mistakes and all the shortcomings and, my marriage or at home or what have you was just kind of like thrown in front of me, and like, you can't serve, you can't do this. And I think what was key for me, there's a few things. One, I knew that fear shouldn't drive a desire to serve. And so I said, okay, let me pray through this and let me take some time to work through these lies that are thrown at me and see truth. Mm-hmm. And then another piece was just talking to other men. So Jesse Jackson was a leader in our group, and I just started talking to him about the opportunity, whether he felt I was qualified with what was seen in Scripture. We just kind of walked through that. But also, I just can't underemphasize, I can't overemphasize, I guess, enough that it really is helpful when other men encourage you and say, hey, I see these qualities in you and I think you would be a good candidate. And that was really something for me that was super impactful. And so as soon as the next round of, where we were looking and trying to find the next group of qualified men in the church to be nominated, there was a few in our group, our growth group. And I said, I need to individually meet with them and talk to them specifically about how I see them qualified for this role. Because I know that, you can make all sorts of excuses in your brain. And so to have another brother come alongside you and say, no, actually, I see these things all the time in your life, and this is important. So that was a big piece for me when I was trying to consider whether or not I was qualified.
But it took some vulnerability for you to open up and some courage from a guy to be willing to have that conversation with you. And, I think that what that assumes is that men in our church are walking alongside other men where there is that type of relationship where that conversation could even happen.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we want, discipleship relationships to be happening. Within those discipleship relationships, you can have those honest, transparent conversations that in your case, really encouraged you and bolstered your faith and helped you step forward to be willing to go through that process. All right. This is going to be my last question for you guys. And I would like Harry, Jeremiah, and Corey each to answer it, but only give one answer. Okay. All right. So here's the question. There are church members listening to this podcast right now. Every one of our church members listening has a deacon that is serving their family. How can church members pray for their deacons? You guys have all served as deacons. How would you like the church members under your care to pray for you? You're always praying for them. How would you like them to pray for you?
Pray that my heart stays pure, that it's focused on the needs of the folks around me, and that my family's needs would be taken care of in the process.
Yeah, I'd say a big piece for me would be to pray for my family, pray for specifically my marriage, because I know that's a key piece to the discipleship health of our kids in our household and everything, right, is from that. So for me personally, as a married man, that would be a big piece for me, would be praying that my marriage is strong.
Yeah, I think I would probably say the same thing. Praying for strength and courage within the family, and so we can serve from a place of strength and courage and rest in the Lord and serve out of that rather than, on our own and feeling the weariness that comes along with it.
Yeah, you guys do such a good job of praying faithfully for the members under your care, and I do hope those listening to this would, even take a moment after listening to this pod right now to pray for whatever deacon is serving their family. Bill, if you don't mind, could you just close us in a word of prayer, and then we'll wrap up the pod.
Sure thing. Oh, Lord, we're so grateful just for you. You've shown yourself faithful in establishing the church. You are the head. We know that. And you've called you've called your church to make disciples wherever we're at, here locally, across the world, wherever it's at. That's your heartbeat. You love us. You love people. I thank you for establishing the church. Thank you for establishing UBC, for all the faithful leaders over many years who have faithfully taught your word, served and cared for people. I thank you for the deacons, Lord, for those who, again, even behind the scenes and not wanting public recognition, who just serve and care for people, godly men who are full of faith, and ones who, again, want nothing more than for disciples to be made and just to love and care for this church body. Lord, I pray as what was shared today, that you would bless these deacons. I pray that they would first have your peace and your strength as they serve. Lord, protect them and their families. Help them to be very watchful, to take care of their families first, and then to the rest of the church families that they have assigned. And Lord, allow them to see spiritual fruit of what they're doing so that their hearts are encouraged for this journey. For the ones that are getting ready to go on this year break, Lord, just allow them to rest. Thank you for the ones that are, again, coming back on to serve. And for all these new deacons who are going to be serving for the first time, Lord, help this process to go really, really well. Thank you for the process that we have of bringing deacons on. And again, for just your faithfulness in their lives. Lord, thank you for the time we can spend on this podcast. And I pray that the people who are listening would really be encouraged to understand more biblically what it means to be a deacon. And Lord, that you would lay on some man's heart, even now, that you'd be working in their heart so that next January, when they get tapped on the shoulder, and that you would have already worked on their heart, and they'd be open to the idea of serving here as a deacon. Thank you again, most of all, for the salvation that you provide through Jesus. Thank you again, how we have hope for this life and for the next. We love you. Thank you for loving us and for our time today. And I pray this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. All right, brothers. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the pod. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode. May the Lord make us a church full of people who make it our aim to know him and to make him known in our homes, in our community, and in the world. We'll catch y'all next time on another episode of UBC Talking Points.